The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining this NCEA webinar, Follow the Blue Brick Road, Learn the National Blue Ribbon Process. I'm Andrea Kopp, Manager of Educational Resources for NCEA, and I'm happy to moderate for you today. Before we begin, please know that all of your microphone connections have been muted. If you have questions during today's presentation, please send those through the question box that appears in your GoToWebinar panel. To ask a question, use your mouse to click into the blank box area. Type your question using your keyboard and then click Send. The webinar presentation will last about an hour and there will be a question and answer portion at the end. Later this evening, you'll receive an email asking you to complete a brief evaluation about this webinar, and I thank you in advance for providing us with feedback about today's programming. In the handout section of your GoToWebinar panel, you'll find some materials about today's presentation, including your certificate of attendance, which can be downloaded at the end of the webinar. You'll also receive these materials along with the recording of the webinar via email in the next 2 days. Before we get started, let us begin as we do all things in prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Now I'm happy to introduce our presenter, Annette Jones, the Assistant Director of Leadership Development for the National Catholic Educational Association. Welcome, Annette. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. Welcome to all of our attendees today. I'm so glad you are here. And as Andrea mentioned, Follow the Blue Brick Road. We will learn today about the National Blue Ribbon Process. This is my second year, starting my second year as an Assistant Director of Leadership Development, the National Catholic Educational Association. And before this role, I served 15 years in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis and the Diocese of Lafayette as a principal, 2 years as an assistant principal in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis, and 9 years as a fourth grade teacher, also in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis. So I bring lots of experience and look forward to talking with you today.
You having trouble with your slides, Annette?
I am. Could you move to the next one, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm just going to take over as presenter.
Okay. And probably to the next slide of the agenda.
Okay.
Okay, so during this webinar, we will cover the overview of the National Blue Ribbon Award. Also, we want to discuss, too, about the role of the Council for American Private Education, and that abbreviation is CAPE, general timeline of the National Blue Ribbon process, and what to do and when we're supposed to do it. Certainly, we want to go over the sections of the application, like the sample of the summary essay. That is the third section of the application, and that is the most important. So we will spend some time in depth on that. Tips about the program, actually the award program in Washington, D.C., and also sharing some ideas about marketing and celebrating the National Blue Ribbon Award, which should begin as we're doing the application. It really shouldn't be after we win the award. So we'll talk about all those things today. Okay, let's look at the National Blue Ribbon Award. This is the seal. This is the seal for 2016. Just a few years ago, they started adding the year at the bottom of the logo. And this National Blue Ribbon Award is an exercise in leadership and perseverance. This is the official logo, and schools may use this once they've received the award. So just to share a little bit of my history with the National Blue Ribbon process, please feel free to ask any questions during the chat, on the chat here on the side. So I've been through this a few times. At Immaculate Heart of Mary School in the Archdiocese of Indianapolis in 2004, our school applied and we were not selected. In 2005, we achieved the National Blue Ribbon. That was my 5th year as being principal there. Later I moved to St. Louis de Montfort Catholic School in the Diocese of Lafayette, Indiana. In 2011 we applied and we were not selected. In 2012 we did not qualify. We missed the state assessment requirements by 1 percentage point in one grade and 2 percentage points in another grade. So certainly the emphasis on our assessments and our state and national assessments, it's very, very important for the National Blue Ribbon Award. And then in 2013 we achieved the National Blue Ribbon Award, and again that was at my 5th year of being a principal there. So I guess the message is apply and apply again. The National Blue Ribbon Award is completely worth the effort. So just think of the benefits for your school community and for the stakeholders, and continue to build your school's resume. And what I mean by that is, what is unique and special about your school? What are your schools and staff members' accomplishments? And if you can continue to add and build on that, that just makes your application stronger. So what is the National Blue Ribbon Award? The United States Department of Education's National Blue Ribbon Award began in 1982, and with over 7,500 schools across the country have been presented with this coveted award. It honors America's most successful schools. The National Blue Ribbon logo, which we saw already, and the flag represent a trademark of excellence, and it's a symbol of quality. It means it's exemplary teaching and learning happens at this school. The bottom line is the National Blue Ribbon Award is the highest level of achievement for schools. So truly, let's go for it. Let's talk a little bit about the National Blue Ribbon Selection Criteria. So what is the criteria? Basically, there are 2 ways to qualify for the National Blue Ribbon Award. Exemplary high-performing schools, and that means that the school's achievement of the school's students in the most recent year tested places the school in the top 15% in the nation in reading or language arts and math as measured by a nationally normed test, or in the top 15% of its state as measured by the state test. So the second way, and I also must mention, if your school gives a state test and a national test, you must qualify on both tests. And disadvantaged background that's for public school only. A long time ago it used to be either or for the non-public schools or the private schools, and now it is just way number 1, the exemplary high-performing schools. As soon as possible, and that means right now is the time to inquire about your National Blue Ribbon qualification for non-public schools based on your state assessment. So what you would need to do is contact the person in your state who works with state assessments. Ask them this question: what are the National Blue Ribbon qualification percentages for non-public schools? And that means non-public schools compared to other non-public schools. This is a very key point. The top 15% among non-public schools is the qualifying threshold. The state calculates this percentage annually, and it changes annually because the scores change every year. Please make sure that you are not receiving public school percentages because those are much different, and they are different qualifiers than our non-public percentages. So make sure you're getting the accurate information. And be persistent. The sooner you have the information, the sooner you will know which direction, whether you're applying or not applying. But I would encourage you to work on the application while you're waiting for a response from the state representative. Keep in mind, the selection committee is looking for truly exemplary model schools, not just strong schools or good schools. Convey that you have programs and practices that are well above the ordinary. And for high schools, just to note that your graduation rate must be over 95%. So that's kind of an overview of the criteria. Let's talk about the National Blue Ribbon Award itself. What are some of the outcomes for receiving this award? Well, certainly you're honored at the recognition ceremony and you attend the National Blue Ribbon program, which is a 2 to 3 day event. Usually you arrive on one day and the other 2 days are filled with a program and the reception. And they're in the fall, in November, in Washington, D.C. Your school will receive a National Blue Ribbon plaque and the National Blue Ribbon flag. And my recommendation would be to see if you can order a second flag, one to frame inside your school and one to hang outside. It's nice to have that frame flag inside your building. And you receive the National Blue Ribbon logo, and you have permission to use this logo on your letterhead or marketing materials, on clothing, for example, if you order jackets or sweatshirts. You get national and local media attention, which is always very nice for marketing our schools, and the application is posted on the U.S. Department of Ed website. Sometimes it's posted on CAPE as well, but I'm not sure about that right now. So what is CAPE? I've referred to that a few times here. CAPE stands for the Council for American Private Education. It is selected by the United States Department of Education to facilitate the process for private, or when I say private schools, I mean also non-public schools. CAPE collaborates often with the U.S. Department of Education concerning the National Blue Ribbon process, the selection, and the actual ceremony. So CAPE oversees the non-public selection committee. Generally, CAPE receives 150 to 300 applications annually, but only 50 schools are selected by this committee. CAPE has ongoing communication with the selected and the non-selected private, and I mean private non-public schools. CAPE assists with the National Blue Ribbon program, and of course they attend the ceremony in Washington, D.C. as well. So the contact information for CAPE, the executive director, his name is Joe McTighe. He is a wonderful executive director. He's a fabulous resource. So all of his contact information is there. And that is the mailing address as well for CAPE. So if you ever need that, just double check that that's where I used to mail the applications to, but make sure that address, of course, is correct. So interaction with CAPE. As an applying school, you will have much interaction with them, making sure that you're following the timeline that's established by CAPE. The tricky part is there will be information in a timeline on the U.S. Department of Education website, and there will be another timeline on CAPE. Because we are non-public or private schools, we need to make sure that we are following the CAPE timeline. But you should go ahead and read what is on the actual U.S. Department of Education just for your own information. Communicate with CAPE should you have any questions. They're an excellent resource, and any question is acceptable. And besides, I've probably asked it at least once, so feel like you're asking questions, and that's all good. Collaborate with CAPE through the entire process all the way until you mail your application. And again, apply and apply again. Go for it. Don't worry about hearing no. Lots of fantastic schools out there, so just try again. Perseverance is key. Let's talk about administrators and CAPE and the relationship that is there. CAPE's website is listed and up on the screen. The United States Department of Education's application, they both contain important information, but like I just said, we want to make sure we're always following the CAPE's guidelines and the CAPE's directions and of course their timeline. So generally CAPE receives many more applications than they're able to submit to the United States Department of Education. They're only permitted to submit 50. Schools are eliminated because of non-compliance with detailed technical requirements. For example, they ask the 9 digits of your zip code. Not including the last 4 digits of that zip code can be a cause for elimination, and that is true. To avoid this unfortunate outcome, please read the requirements closely and proofread. The frequently asked questions, the FAQ section of the CAPE website, is updated as necessary. It will provide clarified information regarding the rules governing the programs. It will respond to evolving questions, and I would just totally encourage you to follow that and read that often. Private school applications are evaluated and processed according to the guidance, standards, procedures, and timeline established on CAPE's website. Please note that the application procedures for private schools differ from the procedures from public schools. So we need to talk a little bit now moving into the timeline. In September, now of course is your time to reach your state assessment person and find out whether you qualify or not, and to also review the application. It's not on CAPE's website yet. It probably won't be there until after the 2016 schools are announced, which should be any time now in September. But in October, it is time to register for the National Blue Ribbon Program. You have to use the online registration form, and you register through CAPE. And schools that are not registered by this deadline, unfortunately, are not able to apply for the award. So you should register for this program, even if you're not certain if your school has qualified yet. Just do not miss this important deadline. Then in early November, that's when your school will receive the code and the keywords. So what happens in December? So in December is the big deadline, and I didn't write a deadline on here because that does change annually. But what you would need to submit from your school are 2 hard paper copies of the online application, an original application cover sheet, and that is signed by the appropriate parties, and typically it's the principal, it's the superintendent, and your board president or board chair, and all appropriate verification documents. And make sure that you have verification from the state that you have qualified in all the areas in language arts, math for your state assessments, and also you need a verification letter from a national testing company as well. So just make sure every school is a little bit different here, but making sure that you're in contact with CAPE and ask the questions specific to your school will be really helpful. I just wouldn't want you to miss anything with the verification. Make sure that you send your package via FedEx to CAPE and on time. And on time with this important document means early, so please send that early to them. I usually try to get it there at least 3 days in advance of the deadline. And then I also called CAPE to make sure they received it, so they heard from me probably a lot. In January, what happens, CAPE's selection committee reviews the application, and then CAPE provides school officials with feedback from the review process. And if I remember correctly, that schools, whether they were in the top 50 and moving on or not, all the schools receive feedback. So that's very helpful, especially if you're not selected in the top 50. And you're notified if your school will be among those 50 nominated, and there will be suggestions and things that you will need to change. In February, that is when the schools who are nominated, those 50, submit their final online applications to the Department of Education. And then in September, the Secretary of Education announces the National Blue Ribbon School. So that's in September, and that's several months later, because they're of course going through the private schools and the public schools to determine the National Blue Ribbon School. So that's why there's such a long time between February and actually finding out in September. And then in November is when the National Blue Ribbon Ceremony in the program happens. So that's really the full cycle of the National Blue Ribbon process. So we're going to move into some application tips. The application is completed online. It's a secure portal, but everything is submitted online. The school, with the exception of what you need to mail, of course, the school ID and password are necessary to access the online application. And then there are narrative responses, or the essays, that must be succinct, and they also must adhere to a word count. Some of the word counts are 800, some are 700, some are 400, but it's very important to adhere to those word counts. No attachments of tables, graphs, charts, photos, or bulleted sections. Everything must be professionally written and, of course, done exceptionally well. Note the details, the word counts, and again, proofread. So we're going to walk through the application. Now this is the application that I pulled from 2016, and as I mentioned, the application can change annually, so just make sure that you're really looking through everything carefully and reading all the directions carefully. The first part is an eligibility certification, and on the last application there were 11 bullet points. I didn't include all those, I just included 4 of them for our purposes of talking today. So we have on here, as far as the official signature page, which is a cover page where the principal and the superintendent and the board chair signs, they are signing saying that they're in compliance. Your school is in compliance with the eligibility certification. So it's very important that if there are 11 points, that your school complies with all 11 points. So for example, we have on here the school configuration includes 1 or more of grades kindergarten through grade 12. It needs to, if it has a grade 7 or higher, it must include foreign language, which is very important in this day and age. An existence for 5 years, and the test data must be available for at least the past 3 years. And the school may not have received the National Blue Ribbon in the last 5 years, and they will list the years, so everyone is counting the same way. And of course, like I said, making sure that all those eligibility requirements are met, so we can certify that with official signatures on the cover page. So part 2 of the application talks about demographic data. On this section, it's just very important to follow the directions, note the details, and proofread. They will talk about things and ask questions about school demographics, the gender, race, mobility rates, ELL, free and reduced lunch, and special education. They also will want other data, for example, staff and student, classroom teacher ratios, attendance rates, post-secondary status, if your school has won a previous National Blue Ribbon. And they will also want to know how many years the principal has been in the position. If the principal has been in there, I believe it's 2 or 1 year, then they will actually encourage the previous principal to attend the event. And then of course the mission and vision statement will be asked as well. Okay. For next part, some essay tips, and this is just in general because we're about ready to launch into the essay part of this. So how do we write this document? The key is to collaborate with staff, and as you know, I've done this a few times, and certainly there's some options here. One, the principal can write the entire application. I don't recommend that, okay, because we're losing perspective there. I understand that sometimes as principals we don't want to ask teachers to do extra work, especially when the time frame is from the beginning of school where parent-teacher conferences are happening through the Christmas program in December. But it's very important that the staff is on board, so we would not want to write all of this ourselves. A small team is okay. That's one other method to use, but the small team can lack perspective, and I'm going to share my favorite method with you. What I like to do is type each question and sub-questions on individual pages. Then I divide the staff into small groups by grade level groups or whatever configuration I decide. And then I would get input from them. They'd just write it on the papers and they would brainstorm in small groups like at a faculty meeting. I'd also get input from the pastor, from my school board, from the parent organization, some parents, I've at least 5 parents, and 2 students per grade. I would also be mindful of community stakeholders and get their input as well. So I would take this broad spectrum of input that were a bullet point listed there, and we would collate the pages. So we put all the answers to question 1 together on the table, all the questions to answer 2 on the table. And keep in mind that some of the questions, for example, about curriculum, would not be pertinent to someone who's a community stakeholder. So we just need to be mindful of which questions should go to which audience. And then a small team, or 1 or 2 people, would write the question 1, 1 or 2 people would write question 2. So I would do this little mini breakout session. And then we would add polish to it. When all those essays were done, I would have some of my best writers and teachers in the building to work on the finished product, making sure that we have proofread, that we used action verbs, that we gave good examples but didn't duplicate examples, and then we would have a finished final product. So I did it wide amount of information and a good breadth of information involving as many people as possible. Make sure your secretary, your custodians, and your lunch people are involved in this, and then I narrowed it from there. So we got a very good perspective. So I hope that tip helps all of you. So the first essay, which is really part 3, it's the summary. And this is the most important essay of your entire application. This is the snapshot of your school, and typically it asks to describe the community and the students who are served. They want to know about traditions, milestones, history, any key strategies for challenging all students. Now that wasn't in my application, but it's a new question now. And how has the previous National Blue Ribbon served the school, and that's if your school has one previously. So we will talk about Essay 3 in depth, and I will show you an example of that because I really believe how important that is, and that's what really launches people into the yes pile or the no pile. So we will talk about that. So Part 4 talks about core curriculum, college and career readiness, preschool curriculum, any other curricular areas, talks about instructional methods and interventions, assessment for instruction. So as I mentioned before about the language requirement, there is a sentence that CAPE would like for all schools to write. And for example, at my last school I wrote, St. Louis de Montfort Catholic School is in compliance with the program's foreign language requirement. So as long as you write that sentence and it's in the directions, then that is good. So we just want to make sure that that is stated very clearly in the curriculum section. So Part 5 talks about the school climate and culture, engaging family and community, professional development, and school leadership. So that is all about how we work as a school with everyone. Part 6 discusses the academic success, and it asks for one practice, an academic related or social emotional, that the school uses to make it so successful. This is truly your choice. There's no right or wrong answer here. It just needs to be well written, and it needs to have some examples to back it up. And keep in mind that the application, the essay questions can change annually, so read carefully and answer the question. So Part 7 is pretty straightforward. Generally, I would include the business office in this answer because it did involve some budgetary items. For example, they want to know about school associations, tax-exempt status, educational costs per student, average financial aid per student, and scholarship assistance, how much scholarship assistance was in our annual budget and how much was given, what percentage of the students. So that was kind of an overview for 7. And then for Part 8, the assessment results, and this is very important. Essentially what you are doing is proving that your scores are worthy of a National Blue Ribbon status. So this needs to be done very carefully and very accurately. My first recommendation right from the top is to consult with CAPE. This is not the place to make an error. Certainly you want to consult with your state and national assessment personnel, provide the data tables that are required, and also provide signed assessment verification documents, and that's for state and national if you give both tests. The assessment verification, the school will also have to provide evidence from the state education department that the scores reported the most recent year placed it in the top 15% in the state in reading and math in each grade. So the national assessment verification is required if the student took a national assessment. So again, it's painful, as I mentioned earlier, to miss by 3 percentage points, but it does happen. And I would just encourage you to work hard to enhance your academic strategies and apply again. So here we have an example. This is in your handout about the Part 3, which is the first summary example. And the reason this is the most important part of the application, it's the first essay, because everything else is data up until this point, and there's no room for humility here. This is your brag page, and by golly, brag away. Share all the wonderful aspects about your school, and remember to follow the word count, to use active verbs, but be succinct. So we're going to go through, this is the essay that was submitted for our 2013 National Blue Ribbon at St. Louis de Montfort Catholic School, and this is in Fishers, Indiana, just north of Indianapolis. And as you read this, just some of the key points, and remember to craft this essay in a word count has to be done in a very strategic way. So my first paragraph, my key points are that it was state accredited, which is very important. You want to show that you have a commitment and you're meeting requirements from another entity outside of the Catholic schools, that we had a junior kindergarten through grade 8, and that our mission statement is stated very clearly and right up front. So that might be a good template for your first paragraph. The next part talked about our strengths and accomplishments. And my theme was, throughout this essay, that we are Catholic, we're academically challenging, and we're service-oriented. And I started here, and at the very end you'll see that same theme goes through the entire essay. We talk about the location here, and I have thinking outside the box. It's in quotation marks, and it draws one's eye right to thinking outside the box, to the question, well, how do they think outside the box? I want to know more. So to use a phrase like that to be eye-catching is pretty good too. Just remember, they want a strong, not just a strong school, not just a good school, but they want an exemplary school. That's what they're looking for. So this is the part where we share the strengths and accomplishments, the academics, the awards by stakeholders, service, and a unique strength of the school. So on the next slide, where we have, we're starting with as a result of our outstanding assessment scores, it talks about the grade A. With that time, Indiana graded schools, so we received a grade A. We were named a Business of the Year school, and we had an interaction with Peyton Manning Children's Hospital, and actually a nice partnership with them, and we had international principals and educators visit our school, and there was some collaboration there. So those were things that we highlighted for the selection committee. So the next part I moved into was, how are the staff and students affected by the educational environment? And I really wanted to highlight here, through technology, through the scholarships, through professional recognition, stakeholders recognition, and grants from the community. It's very important that you present your school as it's part of a community. It's part of an extension of what is happening, and that you're integrated into the community. So this was a good place for us to showcase that. The next part of the paragraph, that summary, was to talk about the stewardship mindset, that we have a responsibility to share our gifts and talents with others. And that was important because it set the tone. Should we receive the National Blue Ribbon, we will help others, we will teach others, we will integrate what we do and show someone else how to do it. So that mindset was very important to us as a school, and so we, of course, included it in our summary. So the first National Blue Ribbon in the diocese, we wanted to clearly mark that we had a goal. And actually, in 2013, what happened is we had 2 schools for the first time become National Blue Ribbon schools in the diocese. So the other school was St. Maria Goretti School in Westfield. So congratulations to that school as well. Then we talked about community and how we share our details about our community and our population served. And this is where you can talk about the type of, if you have a middle to upper middle socioeconomics, that's your community spirit, your parental involvement. All those things are important to showcase and highlight. Then we talked about some milestones. This was a very young school. It opened its doors in 2000, and then we had our first graduates, only 14 students in 2003. In 2008, there were 46 graduates, and then the 10th anniversary was in 2010. And just showing that the school enrollment, I mean, of course I didn't have the original enrollment, it was around 160 students, but by the time we were writing this, which was about 2012, we had 483 students. So certainly a lot of conversation about growth, and we celebrated a lot of these things in here about our history. So it was a very short history. Some schools will have a very long history, 50 years, 75 years, and that's a wonderful accomplishment and something certainly to celebrate and share with the National Blue Ribbon Selection. Traditions, as we know in our Catholic schools, are extremely important. So we really want to answer the question, how do your traditions affect the school community and the larger community? Share that your school is an integral part of the community. And if you look on here, we have examples of that where we talk about Veterans Day, our Grandparents' Day, which of course involve people who are connected to our children in the school, and also our walkathon, which involved our surrounding businesses. The key is to show that your school is not in isolation. Make sure it's integrated into the community. Then the next part we had was spirituality, and it's not listed on here as last. It was just the order which we were asked to do the essays. So this was our special area of course that we picked. We wanted to make sure that we emphasize that the faith is lived daily in the school and on service. And again, mentioning that we had collections for local charities, food drives, kind of a coin war to fund our local charity that we selected a different charity annually. And then we did collections to benefit the children at Peyton Manning Children's Hospital. So I think it's important too in the essay, especially the summary essay, to show that your school has a heart and give a touching example when you were writing. And so our touching example was we did a collaboration, as I mentioned, with Peyton Manning Children's Hospital for our annual walkathon. And of course the purpose of that is to raise money, but we really wanted to make sure that we incorporated the spirituality aspect of our school. So during the walkathon, our students wore dog tags with the hospitalized child's name, their age, and condition, and the children would pray, our children would pray for the ill child throughout the year. And so students would wear the dog tags really from the time the walkathon, when they received those in October, and I would see children wearing those through the entire year. When I'd walk into classrooms, I would see the dog tags in their desks, and they would, you know, have them right there with them all day. So that is a touching story that really pulls at the heartstrings, and it's something that, you know, we were truly proud of and love that tradition, but it's good for the selection committee to know that as well. As far as academics, of course the academics are important, but there are so many opportunities with the additional essays to write about the academics that much of the academic piece does not need to be highlighted here. Really the academics are highlighted in so many of the other essays. Some are 400 words and some are 800 words. But the key points that I pulled from this is that the academics involve a vibrant learning community, that our students are engaged in discovery, and that we collaborate again with the larger community, and that has been a theme, as you have heard me say several times, and that we have continual opportunities for growth through our accreditation, through expectations, and through professional development. The last question, and I believe this question has changed since, of course, our school applied, and this one is, why should our children receive, why should our school, receive the National Blue Ribbon Award? And I kind of just summarized that with my team who wrote this about, again, it's about the faith, the education, academics, and the service, and that was the theme through the entire essay. So if you could structure your essay in a similar fashion and highlight the key special opportunities that are at your school, I think it will be wonderful, and I think a person on the selection committee would really love to read that. So in the mail, that's a very, very important part to making sure that we get that everything done on time, and that means, of course, early. And we're sending that to FedEx to Cape. We're not sending it to the U.S. Department of Ed. It goes to Cape. And we add the cover letter. And that's the previous year in application. So suppose you applied in 2015 and didn't receive it, and then in 2016 you would attach a cover letter saying this is our second time applying, the previous time we applied was in 2015. So you just want to make sure that you're stating that very clearly so for the selection committee understands that this is your second time making an application. Of course, we have our original signed signature page, and that has 3 signatures, so my advice is to start early with that, late October to mid-November, no later than that, to get those signature pages signed. It feels like as it approaches the deadline, especially the deadline happens between Thanksgiving and Christmas, it really comes very quickly. And of course, you will have 2 copies of the application and the documentation from the testing company and any letters from the state, and all that will go in the package. And they will make sure that you have a very clear checklist of everything that's supposed to be mailed, so just follow that very carefully and have other people check that as well. So let's talk about Washington, D.C. What actually happens there? Well, it's the first day you arrive, and the second day is a program, kind of an introductory program, and there are breakout sessions with presenters. And then the second day is the actual luncheon with you know, all the fanfare, and that's when the actual flag and the plaque is distributed. So the principal and the teacher attend the recognition ceremony, but other staff members may attend. They're just not invited to that part of the luncheon. There's also, they have a live streaming in another room where any additional guests other than the 2 who are in the luncheon will go to that room, and that's a very fun place to be. We invited more than 2 people in 2013, and they had a really, just had a ball in the other room too. So it's a very fun event. And as far as while you're here in Washington, D.C., certainly taking advantage of contacting your state rep in advance, and maybe you can make some connections there, and of course visiting the historical sites. And starting to think about celebrating. So as soon as you're thinking about applying, you should think about the other side of it, because often when we do our budgets as principals, we need to start planning. And so if you're planning to apply in 2017 and you're starting to make that budget for the 17-18 school year, start thinking about the budget, the travel to Washington, D.C., any school programs. Suppose you're, you know, having a night for the parents or something, that you'd want to make sure that you have money in that designated pot for that particular event. One thing I did at the schools was to plan 180 days of school, and then I was able to quote-unquote give a free day, which was very fun, and we made sure that we had, of course, counted 181 days when only 180 was required. Students love receiving pens and pencils and ice cream. We actually did t-shirts too. We had our staff design the shirts, so that was fun. That made that personalized. The staff, we ordered National Blue Ribbon jackets and other items, you know, just kind of trinkets and swag. And then for the families, we had a National Blue Ribbon night where there were music and refreshments, and that's where we unveiled the flag and the plaque. Certainly we had state politicians come, so it takes a little time to think about what will we do should we win, and really, like I said, the planning should happen far in advance. So think about things now and how that could impact your school budget, or think about how would you get donations for items should you win. It may be waiting a little bit until actually you know you're qualifying, you've submitted the application, but certainly the budgetary aspect needs to be considered now. One of the great outcomes, I think, of the National Blue Ribbon is just the marketing. As we talked about earlier, the marketing, it's a symbol of excellence. It's the highest award a school could get. So it's a wonderful experience. It does bring the community together. So to start thinking about the marketing now and how will the National Blue Ribbon Award be incorporated into your current marketing plan. And there are many ideas listed there. I know we benefited from grants and donations, certainly from the social media. We redid brochures and letterhead. So certainly it is a very good reminder to the public. One thing that I would really recommend too, as you're involving the teachers early on from the process, that the teachers have an elevator speech and they understand what the National Blue Ribbon is and can explain it in just a couple sentences to someone who does not. So it just makes it so that it seems like everyone is on board with the actual event and the celebration. Here's our picture for our 2013 National Blue Ribbon Ceremony. I'm on there with Ava Kumi, and she is the director for the National Blue Ribbon Schools program, and Christy Worthington, who's a teacher, a third grade teacher. And we represented St. Louis de Montfort in the School of Fishers, Indiana. So I'm available to answer your questions, to help you on the journey to the National Blue Ribbon Award, and we do have a few questions. Now, if you don't receive the award, will CAPE tell us why? Yes, they will. Sometimes they will share just in general, maybe it's to strengthen the essays, or they may say there's a technical problem, but they will give you some kind of guidelines there, so that's good. And then my contact information just came on the screen. I have a great question here from someone. If everything has to be sent in by December, what test scores should you use? The end of the previous year, fall scores, or the end of the year scores? That's an excellent question. We always use previous year, but it also depends on when your testing is. At one point in Indiana, we switched from fall testing to spring, and so it just depends. So that would be the question that I would absolutely say I would recommend go to CAPE and say, this is when we're testing, which scores would you like, and just to make sure you have a direct answer on that. Have another question about the National Blue Ribbon Checklist and what is it? The checklist is CAPE provides a final checklist prior to mailing, so just to make sure that everything is bundled nicely, and it will just be reminders. Do you have the 9-digit zip code? Have you listed, have your signature page with 3 signatures and all of it dated? So they just do some nice reminders. Do you have 2 copies of it in your envelope versus 1? So those are all good reminders, so the checklist is very, very helpful. Okay, so someone asked, if it is awarded, how long is it in effect and does it expire? Once you're a National Blue Ribbon School, you are a National Blue Ribbon School, and it doesn't expire. And that's why it's such a wonderful award, because the marketing and the pride in your school with receiving that award is long-lasting. I have a question here. Our students performed well in all grades. We met the National Blue Ribbon qualification except 5th grade math. Can we still apply? Unfortunately, no. That all the English, language arts, and math must qualify. And remember, that's with state assessments and that's with national assessment. So just make sure that you follow directions exactly. And anything that has to do with assessments, just double check it with CAPE. Okay, we have our last question here. What marketing should I do now in preparation for the National Blue Ribbon application? Well, a couple things actually. I would discuss the program with your staff, make sure that they understand it. I can tell you might get a few gasps when they hear there are probably about 7 or 8 essay questions or more, but make sure that you focus on the outcome and say what will the benefit be to our school and not the work of the application. And then all staff members need to understand the importance of the award and the benefit to the school, so making sure that they understand that. The work does go quickly, just everybody work together, and like I suggested, dividing the questions and then coming together to create the final product. And again, apply, and if it doesn't work, then apply again. And certainly I am here to help you, and so is Joe McTighe from CAPE.
Thank you, Annette. Great presentation this evening. Very informative and great questions from the audience. I want to point out before we conclude that your presentation materials, certificate of attendance, and the handouts are in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel at this time. So if you haven't already and would like to download those, please do so. And before we conclude, I invite all of you to visit our website at ncea.org to see listings for upcoming webinars and other professional development offerings. Thank you, Annette, for sharing your expertise and experiences with our members this evening.
You're welcome.
Thank you all for listening and participating. As a reminder, you will be getting this recorded webinar and the presentation materials sent to you in the next day or so. Thank you again, and may you enjoy a blessed evening.